The man who hereafter will be known as the man who ended Bruno Sammartino's career. Now, McMahon, there can be no doubt, Ken Patera is a better trained athlete, a stronger athlete than Sammartino.
He made me sick. That is what one wrestling manager might have said about 10 of the biggest heroes in the sport. His name was the Grand Wizard of Wrestling. He wore a jeweled turban, he wore big dark glasses, he talked fast, and he talked mean. Fans in packed arenas booed him so loud that the walls seemed to shake. Kids covered their ears. Grown men stood up and shook their fists at the television screen. That is how strong his character was. But here is something you need to know before we go any further. The Grand Wizard never sat down in front of a camera and read off a list of names. He never gave a tell-all interview. He never wrote a book about people he hated. He could not have done any of that, because he passed away on October 12, 1983, from a sudden heart attack. That was years before wrestlers started doing shoot interviews on home video, so there is no real confession tape sitting in a vault somewhere. There is no lost recording where he lists his true enemies one by one. What we do have is something almost as interesting. We have years and years of television film showing exactly who the Grand Wizard fought against on screen, night after night, city after city. In the wrestling business, this kind of story is called kayfabe. It means the show is treated as real, even though everyone backstage knows it is planned. The hate you are about to hear about was never personal. It was a performance, and it worked so well that fans still argue about it decades later. Behind the sequins and the turban was a man named Ernie Roth. People who worked with him say he was kind. They say he was smart. They say he treated young wrestlers like family. Roth was a gay Jewish man working in a business that was not always friendly to people like him. Instead of hiding from that pressure, he turned it into something bold. He picked a stage name that mocked hate groups directly, choosing a colorful turban instead of a plain white hood. He turned a symbol meant to scare people into a costume that made him rich and famous. So while his character screamed insults at the biggest stars in the sport, the real man was busy mentoring rookies and making sure the show ran on time. He even helped haul wrestling rings from town to town, doing hard, unglamorous work that most fans never knew about. He became a father figure to several performers, including one star whose child he became a godfather to. That is not the kind of thing a man who truly hated people tends to do. Today we are counting down 10 wrestlers his character feuded with the hardest. These were not his real enemies. They were his greatest rivals in the story of professional wrestling. Each one pushed him to be a better villain. Each one made the show more exciting for the fans in the seats and the fans at home. Let us start the countdown at number 10 and work our way up to the biggest rivalry of them all. Number 10 on our list is Tony Garea. Garea was a tag team wrestler with fast hands and a big smile. Fans loved him because he always seemed to be having fun in the ring, even when things got rough. He teamed with different partners over the years, and together they chased championship belts that the Grand Wizard's own teams were holding. Picture a young fan sitting close to the ring, watching Garea duck under a big man's arm and tag in his partner just in time. That is the kind of moment that made this rivalry work so well on television. Anytime a Grand Wizard duo lost their titles to a scrappy pair led by Garea, the turban manager would storm to the back of the arena, waving his arms and shouting at anyone near him. The story on television made it look like Garea had personally ruined his week. Of course, behind the curtain, the two men were simply doing their jobs well. Garea's job was to make people cheer. The Wizard's job was to make people boo. When Garea's team pinned the shoulders of one of the Wizard's monsters to the mat, the crowd noise was often deafening. That noise meant tickets sold and shows filled up, which is really the whole point of professional wrestling as a business. The feud never grabbed the very top headlines the way some of the other rivalries on this list did, but it mattered. It gave younger fans a hero their own age to root for. A guy who worked hard, played fair, and still found a way to beat the bad guy's giant partners. Every time the referee raised Garea's hand in victory, the Wizard's face would twist into a look of total disgust. He would point at the ring, shake his head, and mouth words fans could only guess at from the cheap seats. That kind of body language told a story all by itself, even before a single word came out of his mouth on the interview segments that aired later that same week. Tag team wrestling in this era relied on chemistry, timing, and trust between partners, and Garea built a reputation as someone any partner could count on. That reliability made him the perfect long-term thorn in the side of a manager who always seemed to have a fresh giant walking through the curtain. Fans who watched the matches live still talk about how loud the arena got whenever Garea made his comeback after being pushed into the corner by the bigger, meaner opponents the Wizard sent his way. It was simple storytelling, but it worked every single time, which is exactly why Tony Garea earns a spot on this countdown at number 10. He may not have been the flashiest name on this list, but week after week he gave the Wizard a headache, and headaches like that are exactly what keep a rivalry alive on television for years at a time. Think about how hard it is to stay a fan favorite for that long. Wrestling fans in this era paid close attention to every match, every interview, and every small detail of a storyline. A hero who slipped up, even once, could lose the crowd's trust. Garea never slipped. He showed up week after week, match after match, always giving 100% effort. And that consistency is exactly what made him such a reliable headache for a scheming manager like the Grand Wizard. Fans could count on Garea to make things difficult, and the Wizard could count on losing his temper about it on camera, which honestly made for some of the most entertaining interview segments of that whole era. Number 9 is Jimmy Snooka, known to fans everywhere as Superfly. Snooka did something almost nobody else was doing at the time. He climbed to the top rope and jumped through the air onto his opponents. Fans had never seen anything quite like it, and it turned him into an overnight sensation. Kids at home would jump off their couches trying to copy the move, and parents everywhere learned to yell at them to stop before somebody got hurt. This move made him a serious threat to anyone the Grand Wizard was guiding at the time, especially his late career star, a powerful wrestler known as Magnificent Morocco. The feud between Snooka and Morocco became one of the most brutal and memorable rivalries of that whole era. It even led to a match locked inside a steel cage, something that only happened when a story had grown large enough to demand it. Cage matches were rare and special back then, saved for feuds that truly needed a boiling point, a place where there was nowhere left to run and nowhere left to hide. The Wizard stood outside that cage, banging on the metal, screaming instructions, trying anything he could to help his guy escape a beating. That image, a manager rattling the bars of a cage while his monster took punishment inside, became one of the signature pictures of that time period. It is the kind of image that still shows up in old photographs and highlight reels today, decades after the match actually happened. Snooka's high-flying style made him a fan favorite that the Wizards' camp simply could not contain using normal tactics. Regular strategies like slow holds and ground-and-pound offense did not work against a man who could fly through the air at any moment. That unpredictability is exactly why this rivalry felt so dangerous to fans watching at home. Every time Snooka climbed those ropes, the crowd rose to its feet, and every time he landed his big move, you could hear the arena practically explode with sound. The Grand Wizard, for his part, played the frightened, cowardly manager to perfection, hiding behind the ring post, refusing to get too close, always looking for a chance to trip Snooka up from a safe distance. That contrast between a flying hero and a cowardly, scheming manager made for great television, and it is why Jimmy Snooka lands at number 9 on this countdown of on-screen rivals. Their feud is still remembered as one of the most physical and dramatic stories of that whole era of the sport. What made this rivalry even more special was the timing. It happened near the end of the Wizard's own career, when his voice was starting to weaken, and his body was no longer suited to the fast-paced, physical style that wrestling was beginning to demand. Even so, he pushed himself to help build one final, unforgettable feud, guiding his last great star through one of the most violent and celebrated program of that whole time period. Some fans say that watching this feud unfold felt like watching a changing of the guard, an old style of storytelling colliding head-on with a new, faster, more dangerous style that would soon take over the entire industry. Number 8 belongs to a giant of a man named Gorilla Monsoon. Monsoon was enormous, even by wrestling standards, and he had a deep, booming voice that matched his size. Most managers of that time, including the Wizard, avoided him completely whenever they could. His sheer size made ordinary tactics useless, and everyone in the building knew it the moment he stepped through the curtain. On television, the story was simple. Whenever Monsoon showed up ringside, the Wizard would practically run for the exits. He would duck behind his own wrestlers, using them like a human shield, refusing to get anywhere near a man who could pick him up with one arm. This cowardly routine became something fans looked forward to. They knew that if Monsoon walked out to the ring, the Wizard's confident strut would disappear in an instant, replaced by nervous, jittery movements and a much higher-pitched voice on the house microphone. Some fans said they laughed harder at these moments than at any comedy show on television that year. It was comedy mixed with genuine tension, because underneath the joke was a real physical threat that felt believable every single time. Other managers of the era were sometimes willing to take a big body slam or a hard bump from Monsoon just to sell how dangerous he was. The Wizard almost never did this. His character was built entirely around being the brains, not the muscle, and Monsoon represented the one kind of opponent that no amount of clever talking could handle. That contrast, quick words against pure size and strength, gave fans a reason to laugh even during matches that were otherwise serious and hard-hitting. It also reinforced just how good the Wizard was at playing a coward, since fans genuinely believed he would rather lose a match than get within arm's reach of Monsoon. Comic relief like this gave broadcasts some breathing room between the more brutal, physical rivalries on the rest of this list, and it gave the Wizard a chance to show a completely different side of his character than fans usually saw. That is why Gorilla Monsoon sits at number 8 on this countdown. Announcers on the broadcast often played along with the joke, gasping in mock surprise every time the Wizard scurried away from danger. Young fans in the audience loved shouting warnings toward the ring, as if the Wizard might actually listen to them. It became almost a tradition at live shows, a moment everyone waited for, a guaranteed laugh in the middle of an otherwise intense night of matches. That kind of predictable, dependable comedy is a skill all on its own, and very few managers in wrestling history have ever played the frightened coward as convincingly as the Grand Wizard did whenever Gorilla Monsoon came anywhere near him. Number 7 takes us back to the Wizard's earlier days, before he was even known as the Grand Wizard, when he managed under the name Abdullah Farouk. Farouk's job was to guide a wild brawler known as the Sheik through the wrestling territories around Detroit. Standing in their way for years was Bobo Brazil, one of the most respected and popular black wrestlers in the history of the sport, a man whose calm dignity made him a hero to millions of fans. Brazil and the Sheik fought each other over and over, in match after match, city after city, and their rivalry became legendary in its own right, filled with blood, chaos, and unforgettable finishes. Fans lined up around the block just to get a seat for these battles, knowing that anything could happen once the bell rang. Farouk stood at ringside for these battles, whispering instructions, sneaking illegal objects to his wrestler whenever the referee's back was turned. He might slide a sharp object across the mat, or distract the official just long enough for the Sheik to gain the upper hand through underhanded means. Fans hated Farouk almost as much as they hated the Sheik himself, which was exactly the plan. A good manager in this era needed to be despised just as much as his wrestler, so that when the hero finally got his hands on both men, the payoff felt earned. Brazil's calm, dignified presence in the ring made the chaos brought by Farouk and the Sheik stand out even more sharply by comparison. Every riot, every trick, every cheap shot only made the crowd love Brazil more and hate the two villains more. That dynamic, built over years of matches across the Detroit territory, helped define the very style of manager and monster combination that the Wizard would later perfect on a national stage. Without the lessons learned managing against Bobo Brazil, the Grand Wizard character that fans came to know might never have developed the same sharp edge. Every trick he later used with a jeweled turban had its roots in these early days, wearing a simple fez and business suit. That long history is why Bobo Brazil earns his place at number 7 on this countdown. This early chapter of the Wizard's career, back when he still wore a fez instead of a turban, is often overlooked by casual fans who only remember his later national television run. But it was during these years, working alongside a wild and unpredictable brawler, that he learned the timing, the instincts, and the sense of danger needed to survive as a heel manager. Every distraction he pulled off, every illegal object he passed along, every riot he helped stir up, taught him lessons that he would carry with him for the rest of his career. Bobo Brazil, through years of tough, bloody battles, unknowingly helped train the man who would go on to torment an entirely new generation of heroes. Number 6 is Ivan Putski, a wrestler known for incredible raw strength packed into a smaller frame than most of the giants roaming the territory at the time. Putski's signature move involved lifting opponents high into the air and slamming them down with shocking power, something that always brought the crowd roaring to its feet. Fans nicknamed him after his strength, and children in the audience would flex their own small arms trying to look just as tough. This kind of strength made him a constant target for the Wizard's sharp tongue on television interview segments. The Wizard loved to mock the size difference between Putski and his own larger wrestlers, predicting doom for the smaller strongman before every single match. Time after time, though, Putski would prove him wrong, hoisting one giant after another off the mat and sending the arena into a frenzy. It became a running joke among fans that the bigger the Wizard's wrestler, the harder that wrestler would eventually fall. These interview segments gave the Wizard a chance to show off his verbal skills, since he had to come up with new insults and new predictions week after week to keep the rivalry fresh and interesting for fans tuning in. He would question Putski's intelligence, mock his accent, and predict embarrassing losses, all while standing just far enough away to avoid getting grabbed himself. Putski, for his part, played the role of the humble strongman perfectly, letting his actions in the ring speak louder than any comeback he could offer on the microphone. That contrast, a manager who talked circles around everyone but a wrestler who simply lifted people over his head in response, made for compelling, easy-to-understand television. Audiences did not need complicated storylines to enjoy this feud. They just needed to see a big man doubt a smaller man, and then watch that smaller man prove him wrong, match after match. That simple but effective formula is why Ivan Putski ranks at number 6 on this list of on-screen rivals. A lasting reminder that in wrestling, strength often speaks louder than words. There is also something worth noting about how these interview segments were filmed. Wrestlers and managers of this era usually taped several weeks of television in a single day at small studios in Pennsylvania. That meant the Wizard had to come up with fresh insults about Putski over and over, sometimes several times in one single afternoon, without ever repeating himself in a way that felt stale. His ability to do this, week after week, year after year, is one of the most underrated parts of his entire career. Fans at home never saw the exhausting schedule behind the scenes. They only saw a confident, sharp-tongued villain who always seemed to have the perfect insult ready, no matter how many times Putski had already proven him wrong. Number 5 is Chief J. Strongbow, one of the most popular Native American characters in wrestling history during that era. Strongbow's signature move, a spinning tomahawk chop, would send crowds into a frenzy every single time he landed it clean. His entrance alone was enough to get an entire arena on its feet, clapping along before the match even began. Standing in his way, again and again, were two of the Wizard's most notorious tag team stars, a pairing known for using throat chops and throwing salt into the eyes of their opponents whenever the referee looked away. These matches were rarely clean, and that was exactly the point. Every time Strongbow appeared to have the match won, one of the Wizard's wrestlers would find some sneaky way to turn the tide, usually while the Wizard himself stood just outside the ring, shouting instructions and celebrating each dirty trick with obvious delight. Fans wanted nothing more than to see Strongbow finally get his hands on the manager himself, but the format of the shows at that time rarely allowed managers to take direct physical punishment. Instead, all that frustration got poured into the matches against his wrestlers, giving every single encounter extra weight and extra heat. Strongbow's popularity meant that these matches were often featured prominently on television tapings, giving the Wizard plenty of screen time to sharpen his cowardly, conniving character even further. Over dozens of matches spread across many years, this rivalry became one of the most consistent and dependable draws for arenas across the northeastern part of the country. It also gave the Wizards' tag team stars a chance to look genuinely dangerous, since beating a beloved star like Strongbow required constant cheating and constant interference from ringside. That long, dirty rivalry, filled with salt throws and sneaky throat chops, is why Chief J. Strongbow claims the number 5 position on this countdown of the Grand Wizard's fiercest on-screen rivals. It is also worth remembering just how often these two sides crossed paths. Unlike some rivalries that burned bright for a few months and then faded away, the story between Strongbow and the Wizards' tag teams stretched across years of television, with new chapters added every single season. Wrestlers came and went from the Wizards' stable, but the underlying story stayed the same, a dignified hero fighting against a manager who always seemed to have one more dirty trick hidden up his sleeve. That kind of long-term storytelling built enormous trust with the audience, since fans always knew exactly what to expect, even if they never knew exactly how each individual match would end. Number 4 is Pat Patterson, whose story with the Grand Wizard took an unusual turn compared to everyone else on this list. Patterson actually started out working alongside the Wizards camp, eventually becoming the very first person to hold the Intercontinental Championship, a brand new title created during that period. Fans watched him rise from an ally of the villains to one of the most beloved champions of his generation. But over time, Patterson turned away from the villain's side of the story and became a beloved hero in his own right. Once that happened, the Wizard did something that felt like a betrayal even within the fictional world of the show. He essentially handed off Patterson's old business dealings to a rival manager, then turned his full attention toward destroying his former ally using a new, even more dangerous wrestler under his guidance. Fans felt the sting of that betrayal just as much as Patterson's character seemed to. That feud eventually boiled over into one of the most talked-about brawls of the era, a chaotic fight that broke out in a hallway of Madison Square Garden itself, far away from the ring, blurring the line between planned television drama and something that felt shockingly real to the fans watching. Segments like that hallway brawl were rare, and they left a lasting impression precisely because they broke the normal pattern of matches happening only inside the ropes. The betrayal angle also gave the Wizard's character extra depth, showing that his loyalty extended only as far as it benefited him personally. Fans who had once cheered for Patterson while he worked alongside the Wizard's camp now cheered even louder, watching him fight back against his former business partner. That layered story, filled with turns and betrayals, is exactly why Pat Patterson holds the number 4 position on this countdown of the Grand Wizard's greatest on-screen rivals, a feud that proved even loyalty could turn to hatred in the world of professional wrestling. Stories built around betrayal only work if fans truly believe the friendship was real in the first place, That is part of what made this particular rivalry so effective. Patterson and the Wizard had spent real time on screen together, appearing friendly, working toward common goals, before the story shifted and turned them into enemies. Fans who had grown used to seeing them side by side felt genuinely surprised when the split finally happened. And that surprise is exactly the kind of reaction that makes a wrestling storyline memorable years and even decades later. Number 3 is Pedro Morales, a wrestler adored by the large Puerto Rican fan base that packed arenas throughout the northeastern circuit during this era. Morales represented pride and hope for an entire community, and that made him an especially important target within the storylines of the time. Whenever he defended his championship, entire sections of the arena would erupt in cheers loud enough to drown out the announcers. The Wizard's response was to bring in a powerful challenger who used a devastating move called the Heart Punch, capable of ending matches in a single, shocking blow. In a moment that stunned fans across the territory, that challenger used the Heart Punch to defeat Morales for the top championship belt in a packed arena in Philadelphia. This victory sent shockwaves through the fan base, and reaction to the title change was immediate and intense, since Morales had held that championship for a long stretch of time before losing it in such a sudden and violent fashion. The Wizard celebrated wildly at ringside, soaking in boos from a crowd that felt genuinely heartbroken over what had just happened to their hero. That kind of emotional investment from the audience does not happen by accident. It takes years of careful storytelling to build a champion that fans care about so deeply, and it takes a well-built villain to make his downfall feel truly devastating. The Wizard's role in orchestrating that title change cemented his reputation as one of the most effective and hated managers of the entire decade. Fans in that region still remember exactly where they were when they heard the news of that championship change, which tells you everything about how powerful this particular rivalry truly was. That single dramatic moment in Philadelphia, and the years of build-up that led to it, is why Pedro Morales lands at number 3 on this countdown. Championship changes like this one were treated as major, rare events during this time period. Nothing like the frequent title switches fans might expect from more modern wrestling shows. When a belt changed hands, especially one held by someone as popular as Morales, the news spread through word of mouth, through wrestling magazines, and through local newspapers covering the sport. The Grand Wizard's willingness to orchestrate such a shocking and unpopular outcome shows just how far his character was willing to go to accomplish a goal, even if it meant becoming one of the single most hated men in an entire region of the country for weeks afterward. Number 2 is Bob Backlund, a technically skilled and relentlessly determined champion who held the top title in the promotion for an astonishing stretch of over 2,000 consecutive days. That kind of championship reign meant the Wizard spent years, not just months, trying every possible strategy to take the belt away from him. Every few months, a new challenger would arrive with a new gimmick, a new strategy, and a new promise from the Wizard that this time would finally be different. One challenger after another walked through the curtain under the Wizard's guidance, each one bigger or meaner or trickier than the last, and each one failed to solve the puzzle that was Bob Backlund's championship reign. This constant parade of challengers gave the Wizard endless material for his interview segments, allowing him to promise fans, week after week, that this next challenger would finally be the one to end Backlund's reign for good. Of course, none of them ever succeeded, and that failure, repeated over and over across years of television, actually made both men look better in the eyes of the fans. Backlund's reputation as an unbeatable champion grew stronger with every failed challenge, while the Wizard's reputation as a manager who simply refused to give up, no matter how many times he lost, made him one of the most enduring villains of the era. Long championship reigns like this one required patience from everyone involved in the storytelling, since fans needed fresh reasons to keep tuning in month after month to see if this would finally be the week that history changed. The Wizard provided exactly that kind of fresh energy, using his sharp promo skills to build anticipation before every single new challenger's attempt. That multi-year chess match between a determined manager and an unbeatable champion, one that never truly ended in the Wizard's favor, is why Bob Backlund earns the number 2 spot on this countdown of the Grand Wizard's greatest on-screen rivals. It takes a very specific kind of storytelling to make repeated failure entertaining instead of frustrating for an audience. Most feuds need a winner and a loser to feel satisfying, but this rivalry survived for years without ever giving the Wizard the victory he wanted. Instead, fans grew to enjoy watching him try, again and again, refusing to admit defeat even after every single challenger came up short. That stubborn, never-quit attitude gave his character a strange kind of respect from fans, even as they continued booing him with everything they had at every single television taping. Number 1, at the very top of this list, is Bruno Sammartino, the single biggest star the promotion had during that entire time period. Sammartino held the top championship for a combined total of many years across 2 separate reigns, drawing sold-out crowds practically every single time he defended his title inside Madison Square Garden. His popularity was so massive that entire tours were built around his championship defenses. For the Wizard's character, dethroning Sammartino represented something close to an obsession, a goal that consumed years of on-screen storytelling. 2 different challengers under the Wizard's guidance actually managed to accomplish what dozens of others could not, ending Sammartino's historic championship reigns in shocking upset victories that left entire arenas stunned into silence before erupting into chaos. These victories did not happen quickly or easily. They were built up over months of interviews, matches, and near misses, giving fans every reason to believe their hero truly might lose, right up until the moment it actually happened. When it finally did happen, the impact was enormous, sending ripples through the wrestling world that people still discuss today, decades later. Newspapers covered the story, fans wrote letters, grown adults reportedly cried in the stands. The Wizards gloating afterward, dancing and celebrating at ringside while a stunned crowd booed him with everything they had, became one of the most iconic images of villainy from that entire decade of professional wrestling. No other rivalry on this list carried the same weight, the same stakes, or the same lasting impact on wrestling history as this one. Beating Sammartino, even twice, using different challengers years apart, proved that the Wizard's cunning and patience could eventually overcome even the most beloved and dominant champion in the business. That is exactly why Bruno Sammartino stands at number 1 on this countdown of the Grand Wizard's greatest on-screen rivals, the ultimate proof of just how effective this small man in a jeweled turban truly was at making people believe. Consider just how difficult it is to build a villain capable of ending the reign of the single biggest star in the entire company, not once but twice, years apart, using 2 completely different challengers. That kind of repeated success does not happen by luck. It takes a manager who understands timing, who understands crowd psychology, and who knows exactly how to build a challenger up so that his eventual victory feels believable rather than random. The Grand Wizard proved he had all of these skills by pulling off the impossible against the one champion nobody else could seem to solve, cementing his legacy as one of the greatest villains the sport has ever produced. So there you have it, 10 legendary rivals of the man behind the turban and the sunglasses. Remember, none of this was real hatred. It was a performance, built night after night, city after city, to fill arenas and thrill fans. The man behind the character, Ernie Roth, passed away long before wrestlers ever sat down to reveal their true feelings on camera, in shoot interviews, and tell-all videos. What he left behind instead was something arguably more impressive. Years of unforgettable television, built entirely on his talent for making people boo, his gift for sharp and clever insults, and his eye for picking the perfect challenger for every single champion he tried to dethrone. In 1995, more than a decade after his passing, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, honored by the very business he helped shape. Proof that the man behind the character was never truly forgotten. Thanks for watching this countdown of the Grand Wizard's 10 biggest on-screen rivals, from Tony Garea all the way up to Bruno Sammartino. Let us know in the comments which of these classic rivalries you remember best, and we will see you in the next video.